You're the biggest disappointment I've ever had." Emily's words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire, toxic and suffocating. Dr. Craig Young's pen paused mid-scribble on his notepad, and I could practically hear the scratching sound of my 15-year marriage being crossed out with a thick black line. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe. Drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I sat there in that beige therapist's office, rain drumming against the windows of downtown Millbrook, Maine, and felt something inside me snap. Not break. Snap. Clean and decisive, like a branch finally giving way under too much weight. "Fair enough," I said. That was it. 2 words. Emily blinked, probably expecting me to grovel or argue or do that thing I'd been doing for months, trying to fix whatever was broken between us. But I was done. Completely, utterly done. Dr. Young cleared his throat. "Mark, how does that make you feel when Emily says, 'Like I've been wasting my time'?" I interrupted, standing up. "Emily, you win. Congratulations." I walked out of that office and didn't look back. Emily called after me, but her voice sounded distant, like she was shouting from the bottom of a well I'd already climbed out of. The drive home to our comfortable colonial on Maple Street took 12 minutes. 12 minutes to plan the rest of my life, without the woman who'd just told me I was her biggest disappointment. The irony wasn't lost on me. Emily taught yoga, preached about mindfulness and inner peace, but she'd just delivered the most mindlessly cruel blow I'd ever received. I pulled into our driveway and sat in my Honda Accord for a moment, looking at the house we'd bought together 8 years ago. White picket fence, flower beds Emily obsessed over, the red front door she'd painted because it was welcoming. It looked like a postcard for the American dream. Too bad the dream had turned into a nightmare somewhere along the way. Inside, I went straight to our bedroom and pulled out my old duffel bag from the closet. Emily wouldn't be home for another hour. She always went to her yoga studio after therapy sessions to center herself. Perfect. I packed methodically. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, important documents. I wasn't running away. I was making a strategic withdrawal. In my basement man cave, I sat at my desk and wrote a note on my letterhead from Grafton and Associates, the small advertising agency I'd built from nothing. "Emily, you called me your biggest disappointment. I accept that assessment. Consider this my resignation from the position of disappointing husband. Be well. You win. Mark." I left it on the kitchen counter, weighted down with her favorite coffee mug, the one that said, "Namaste in bed." How fitting. The Millbrook Inn wasn't the Ritz, but it was clean and quiet. I checked in for a week, figuring that would give me time to find a more permanent arrangement. The desk clerk, a kid who looked barely old enough to vote, handed me the key to room 237. "Business or pleasure?" he asked, making conversation. "Liberation," I replied. That night I called my lawyer, Jim Morrison. Yes, that was really his name, and no, he'd never heard the jokes before. Jim had handled the legal work when I'd started my agency 5 years ago. He was thorough, discreet, and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when necessary. "Mark, everything okay? It's pretty late." "I need to file for separation, Jim. Tomorrow, if possible." There was a pause. "What happened?" "My wife helped me realize I've been living a lie. I'd like to stop doing that." "Okay. Come in first thing Monday morning. We'll need to discuss assets, custody if there are kids." "No kids. We kept putting it off. Good thing, as it turns out." Another pause. "Mark, are you sure about this? Sometimes couples therapy takes time." "Jim, she told me I was the biggest disappointment she'd ever had, in front of a licensed therapist. I think we're past the working things out stage." "Jesus." "Okay, Monday morning, 9 sharp." I hung up and opened my laptop. First things first, I changed all my passwords, bank accounts, credit cards, email, social media, everything. Then I called the bank and put a freeze on our joint accounts pending legal separation. Emily had her own checking account for her yoga business, so she wouldn't be stranded, but she also wouldn't be able to clean out our savings on impulse. My phone buzzed. Text from Emily. "Mark, where are you? Your note doesn't make sense. We need to talk." I turned off my phone. The next morning, I drove to my office early. Grafton and Associates occupied the second floor of a converted Victorian house downtown, overlooking Millbrook's picturesque harbor. I'd always loved this view: fishing boats bobbing in the morning mist, seagulls wheeling overhead, the lighthouse on Rocky Point blinking steadily in the distance. Nina Castellano, my office manager, was already at her desk with her usual enormous coffee. Nina was 45, sharp as a tack, and had been with me since I'd started the agency. She took one look at me and frowned. "You look like hell. What happened?" "Emily and I are separating. I'll be staying at the Millbrook Inn for now." Nina's eyebrows shot up. "Holy shit! Sorry, boss. That's just... What happened?" I gave her the short version while she poured me coffee from the office pot. Nina listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking her head. "I never liked her," Nina said finally. "Too fake. All that yoga namaste bullshit while she treated you like garbage." "Tell me how you really feel," I said, but I was smiling for the first time in months. "You want my honest opinion? You're better off. Emily always acted like she was doing you a favor by being married to you. Like you should be grateful she'd settled for some regular guy who only made decent money and treated her well." That stung because it was true. Emily had a way of making me feel like I should be thankful for her attention. Her friends, Sienna Walsh and Harper Chen, reinforced that dynamic, always talking about how Emily was too good for small-town life, how she deserved better than Millbrook. Well, now she could have better. Or try to find it. My phone had 17 missed calls from Emily and 12 text messages. I scrolled through them. "Mark, this is ridiculous. Come home so we can talk like adults. You can't just freeze our accounts. I have bills to pay. Sienna says you're having a midlife crisis. This isn't you. Fine. If you want to act like a child, I'll treat you like one." That last one made me laugh out loud. Emily calling me childish after her performance in therapy yesterday was rich. I called Jim Morrison. "Jim, it's Mark. I need that separation paperwork filed today, not Monday." "What's the rush?" "My wife is escalating. I want legal protection before she really gets warmed up." "I'll make some calls. Can you be here at 2? "I'll be there." The rest of the morning flew by. I had 3 client meetings, approved layouts for a restaurant's new ad campaign, and reviewed proposals for a tourism board contract. Work was a blessed distraction from the wreckage of my personal life. At lunch, I drove to the Driftwood, Millbrook's favorite dive bar. It was the kind of place where locals gathered to gossip, complain about the weather, and solve the world's problems over beer and fried clams. The owner, Tara McGillicuddy, had been serving drinks in Millbrook for 20 years and knew everyone's business before they did. "Mark Grafton," Tara called out as I walked in. "Don't usually see you here for lunch. Where's the missus?" "Probably planning my funeral," I said, sliding onto a bar stool. "Beer me, Tara." She pulled a shipyard from the cooler and popped it open. "Trouble in Paradise?" "Paradise got foreclosed on." Tara's expression shifted to serious concern. "Aw, hell. What happened?" I gave her the sanitized version while she wiped down glasses. The Driftwood's lunch crowd was light. Just me, old Lenny Kowalski reading his newspaper in the corner booth, and 2 construction workers from the new condo development arguing about the Patriots' chances this season. "Emily always did think she was hot shit," Tara said when I finished. "No offense, Mark, but your wife has an attitude problem. Acts like she's doing everyone a favor just by existing. You're the second person to tell me that today. Because it's true. You know what your problem is? You're too nice. Emily took advantage of that." I was starting to see a pattern in the feedback I was getting. At 2 o'clock sharp, I was in Jim Morrison's office signing separation papers. Jim had worked fast. The documents were comprehensive and brutal. Immediate separation of assets, division of property, even a clause preventing either party from making major financial decisions without court approval. This is pretty aggressive, Mark. You sure you want to go nuclear right out of the gate? Emily called me her biggest disappointment, Jim. In front of a therapist. After 15 years of marriage, I'd say she already went nuclear. Jim nodded grimly. Fair enough. I'll file these today. Emily will be served tomorrow morning. At the yoga studio? If that's where she'll be, yes. She teaches a class at 9. Big crowd, lots of her friends. Perfect timing. Jim looked at me sharply. Mark, you're not usually vindictive. I'm not being vindictive. I'm being efficient. Emily likes an audience for her drama. I'm just giving her what she wants. That evening, back at the Millbrook Inn, I sat by the window overlooking the harbor and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. My phone was still off, my lawyer had my back, and for the first time in months, I wasn't walking on eggshells around Emily's moods. I ordered Chinese takeout and opened my laptop to catch up on emails. Most were routine business correspondence, but one stood out, from my buddy Richie Santos, who worked construction and always had his ear to the ground about local gossip. Dude, heard you and Emily are having problems. If you need anything, call me. Also, thought you should know. Saw Emily at Gino's Pizza yesterday with some guy I didn't recognize. Fancy car, expensive suit. Just thought you should know. R. I stared at that email for a long time. Emily at Gino's with another man. Yesterday, the day before our therapy session. The day before, she'd called me her biggest disappointment. Suddenly, her words made perfect sense. I called Richie at 7 a.m. He answered on the second ring, sounding like he'd been awake for hours. Mark, how you holding up, buddy? I've been better. Tell me about this guy you saw with Emily. Richie was quiet for a moment. You sure you want to know? Richie, my wife just blew up our marriage in front of a therapist. Yeah, I want to know. Okay. Tall guy, maybe late 30s, dark hair, driving a silver BMW. Looked like money, you know. They were sitting in a corner booth, real cozy. She was touching his hand a lot. My stomach dropped, but my voice stayed steady. You recognize him? Never seen him before, but I asked around. Tommy Ricci was there with his wife. He said the guy looked familiar, but couldn't place him. Might be from out of town. Thanks for telling me. Mark, I'm sorry, man. This sucks. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and processed this information. Emily was having an affair. That explained everything. The distance, the criticism, the sudden decision that I was inadequate. She'd found someone new and was clearing the decks. Well, two could play that game. I called Nina at the office. Nina, I need a favor. You still have that cousin who works as a private investigator? Danny? Yeah, he's got a little agency in Portland. Why? I need someone followed, discreetly. Jesus, Mark. You sure about this? Nina, Emily's having an affair. I need to know who with and for how long. Can Danny handle that? He's good at his job. I'll call him. An hour later, I was having coffee with Danny Castellano at a diner in Portland, 30 minutes south of Millbrook. Danny was Nina's younger cousin, a former cop who'd gone private after a back injury ended his patrol career. He was thorough, professional, and expensive. Standard surveillance package is $500 a day plus expenses, Danny explained. That includes photos, video when possible, detailed reports on locations and activities. How long you want me on this? Start with 3 days. If we get what we need sooner, great. If not, we'll extend. I'll need recent photos of your wife, her schedule, vehicle information. I slid a folder across the table. Everything's in there. She teaches yoga classes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings, Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Weekends are usually free. Danny flipped through the photos. Pretty woman. Sorry this is happening, Mark. Just get me the truth. That's all I want. Back in Millbrook, I drove past Emily's yoga studio, Peaceful Warrior Wellness. Through the big front windows, I could see her leading a class, 20 women in expensive yoga pants following her movements. Emily looked serene, centered, completely at peace. It was all an act. Everything was an act. I parked across the street and watched for a few minutes. After class, Emily's friends Sienna Walsh and Harper Chen lingered to chat. Sienna was Emily's business partner and best friend since college, a tall, willowy blonde who taught the evening classes. Harper was newer to their circle, a social media influencer who'd moved to Millbrook from Boston 2 years ago and immediately attached herself to Emily's group. They were probably discussing Emily's poor, delusional husband who'd had a breakdown and run away from home. I could imagine the conversation. Mark's having a midlife crisis. Emily's better off without him. She deserves so much more. Well, they were about to get a reality check. My phone buzzed. Text from Emily. Mark, the lawyer papers are ridiculous. Call me so we can work this out like adults. I turned off my phone and drove to the Driftwood. Tara was working the lunch shift again, and the place was busier than yesterday. Word was getting around town about my separation from Emily, and I could feel the curious stares from other patrons. Millbrook was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business. How you doing today, honey? Tara asked, sliding a beer across the bar. Better. Getting some clarity on the situation. Good. Sometimes you need to step back to see the whole picture. Lenny Kowalski shuffled over from his corner booth, beer in hand. Lenny was 70-something, retired from the paper mill, and the unofficial mayor of the Driftwood's afternoon crowd. Mark, heard you and Emily are splitting up. That's too bad. Thanks, Lenny. Course, can't say I'm surprised. That wife of yours always acted like she was too good for the rest of us. What do you mean? Lenny settled onto the bar stool next to me. Remember last summer at the Lobster Festival? Emily wouldn't eat anything from the food trucks because it wasn't clean eating, made a big show of bringing her own quinoa salad or whatever, then spent the whole time complaining about how tacky the festival was. I remembered that. Emily had been miserable all day, criticizing everything from the music to the decorations to the crowds. I'd chalked it up to her being tired, but looking back, it was part of a pattern. She used to be fun, I said, more to myself than to Lenny. People change, Tara said. Sometimes not for the better. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Nina. Danny's already on the job, says he'll have preliminary report by tomorrow. That was fast. Either Danny was very good at his job, or Emily wasn't being very careful about hiding her affair. I spent the afternoon at the office, trying to focus on work. We had a big presentation next week for the tourism board contract, a campaign to promote Millbrook as a romantic weekend destination. The irony was painful, but I pushed through it. My business was the one thing in my life that was still solid, and I wasn't going to let my personal problems destroy it. At 5 o'clock, Nina knocked on my office door. Danny called. He wants to meet tonight. Says he's got something interesting. We met at the same diner in Portland. Danny looked grim as he slid a manila envelope across the table. That was easier than I expected, he said. Your wife's not exactly being subtle. I opened the envelope and felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. Photos of Emily with the man Richie had described, tall, dark-haired, expensive clothes. They were at a coffee shop in Camden, holding hands across the table. Another photo showed them kissing in the parking lot next to his silver BMW. A third showed them entering a boutique hotel in Rockport. Who is he? I asked. Jake Fallon, real estate developer from Boston. He's been working on that new condo complex down by the marina, Millbrook Landing. Divorced, no kids, worth about $3 million on paper. How long has this been going on? Based on what I observed today and some discreet questions around town, I'd say at least 2 months, maybe longer. 2 months. That explained Emily's sudden dissatisfaction with our marriage, her constant criticism, her new obsession with finding herself. She'd been comparing me to Jake Fallon and finding me wanting. "There's more," Danny said. "I followed them to the hotel in Rockport. They spent 3 hours there this afternoon. I've got photos of them going in and coming out." I looked at those photos and felt something cold settle in my chest. Emily looked happy, genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. She was glowing, laughing, touching Jake's arm as they walked to his car. "What do you want me to do next?" Danny asked. "Keep watching. I want to know everything, where they meet, how often, what they're planning." "This is going to hurt, Mark. You sure you want all the details?" "Danny, my wife told me I was her biggest disappointment. Then I find out she's been screwing around with a millionaire developer. Yeah, I want all the details. Knowledge is power." That night, back at the hotel, I spread the photos out on the bed and studied them. Emily looked like a different person with Jake. Younger, more vibrant, more alive. It hurt, but it also clarified things. This wasn't about me being inadequate. This was about Emily being a liar and a cheat. I called Jim Morrison at home. "Jim, it's Mark. Emily's having an affair." "Jesus, how do you know?" "Private investigator, photos, hotel receipts, the whole package. That changes things. Adultery gives us leverage in the settlement negotiations." "Good. I want her to understand that actions have consequences." "Mark, are you okay? You sound different." "I'm fine, Jim. For the first time in months, I'm thinking clearly." After I hung up, I opened my laptop and started researching Jake Fallon. LinkedIn profile showed he was the founder of Fallon Development, specializing in luxury residential properties. His company website featured glossy photos of high-end condos and commercial buildings throughout New England. Jake Fallon was everything I wasn't: rich, flashy, unattached. He could offer Emily the sophisticated lifestyle she'd been craving. The only problem was, he was also married to someone else. Wait, Danny had said Jake was divorced, but the business website showed photos from a charity gala last year, Jake with his arm around an elegant brunette identified as Jake Fallon and wife Rebecca. I dug deeper. Public records showed Jake and Rebecca Fallon had filed for divorce 6 months ago, but it wasn't finalized yet. So Jake was technically still married when he started his affair with Emily. This was getting interesting. I made a note to have Danny investigate Jake's background more thoroughly. If Jake was lying to Emily about his marital status, that was useful information. If he had other secrets, even better. My phone rang. Emily again. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. "Mark, this is getting ridiculous. I know you're upset about what I said in therapy, but you're acting like a child. We need to discuss the separation papers because some of these terms are completely unreasonable. Call me back." No apology, no acknowledgement that she'd been cruel, just irritation that I wasn't playing along with her script. I deleted the message and turned off my phone. Tomorrow, Danny would dig deeper into Jake Fallon's life, and I would start planning my next move. Emily wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to learn that I was much better at games than she'd ever imagined. Danny's full report arrived the next morning, and it was a goldmine. Jake Fallon wasn't just having an affair with Emily, he was using her. His divorce from Rebecca was messy and expensive, his development company was leveraged to the hilt, and the Millbrook Landing project was behind schedule and over budget. "Your wife's not his first affair," Danny explained over coffee. "I talked to a contact in Boston. Jake's got a pattern. He targets married women in towns where he's developing properties, uses them for local connections, inside information, sometimes financial backing." Financial backing. Yeah. His last project in Kennebunkport, he convinced a local woman to invest her divorce settlement in his company. She lost everything when that deal went south. I stared at the photos of Emily and Jake. "You think he's after our money?" "I think he's after whatever he can get. Your wife owns a business, right? Has local connections? That's valuable to a developer trying to navigate small-town politics." This was better than I'd hoped. Not only was Emily cheating, she was being conned by a professional scumbag. What else did you find? Danny pulled out another folder. Jake's been meeting with town officials about fast-tracking permits for Millbrook Landing. He's also been asking around about other development opportunities, the old marina property, that vacant lot behind the library. And here's the interesting part. He's been using Emily's yoga studio for some of these meetings. What? Yeah, I've got photos of Jake meeting with Harbor Master Bill Duffy at Peaceful Warrior Wellness last Tuesday. They were looking at blueprints, shaking hands. Emily was serving them coffee like some kind of hostess. My hands were shaking with anger. Emily wasn't just cheating on me. She was helping Jake manipulate our town, using her business and her reputation to smooth his path. There's more, Danny continued. I followed Jake to a bank meeting yesterday. He's trying to get a construction loan extension, but the bank's nervous about his finances. Word is, he needs new investors or the Millbrook Landing project could go under. How much does he need? About $2 million. Exactly the amount Emily and I had in combined assets. Our house, our savings, her business, my agency, it all added up to roughly $2 million. Danny, I need you to keep watching them, and I need you to find out everything you can about Jake's business practices. If he's running some kind of con, I want proof. You got it. What are you planning? I'm planning to give Emily exactly what she deserves. That afternoon, I drove to Emily's yoga studio. She was teaching her Wednesday class, and through the windows I could see the usual crowd of Millbrook's yoga enthusiasts following her through a series of poses. Emily looked serene and spiritual, the picture of inner peace. What a load of garbage. I parked across the street and waited. When class ended, Emily's students filed out, chatting about their poses and their chakras and their mindful breathing. Then, Sienna Walsh emerged, followed by Harper Chen. They stood outside the studio talking for a few minutes before getting into their cars. Emily was alone inside, cleaning up mats and turning off the sound system. This was my chance. I walked across the street and pushed open the studio door. Emily looked up, startled. Mark, what are you doing here? We need to talk. Emily's expression shifted from surprise to annoyance. If you want to talk, call me. Don't just show up at my workplace. Your workplace? Right. Is that what we're calling it now? What's that supposed to mean? I walked further into the studio, looking around at the peaceful decor, Buddha statues, inspirational quotes on the walls, the faint scent of sandalwood incense. It all felt like a stage set now, props for Emily's performance as a spiritual guru. Nice place for business meetings, I said casually. Very calming atmosphere for discussing construction permits and development deals. Emily went very still. What are you talking about? Jake Fallon, Bill Duffy, blueprints on your reception desk. Ring any bells? The color drained from Emily's face. Mark, I don't know what you think you saw. I didn't see anything, Emily, but my private investigator did. Amazing what a telephoto lens can capture through those big windows. Emily sank into the chair behind her reception desk. You hired a private investigator? You called me your biggest disappointment, then served me with attitude when I tried to protect our assets. What did you expect? Mark, you don't understand. Jake is just... What? Your business partner? Your spiritual advisor? Your afternoon entertainment at the Rockport Inn? Emily's face crumpled. Oh, God. Yeah. Oh, God. 2 months, Emily. 2 months you've been lying to my face while screwing around with a married real estate developer? He's not married. He's divorced. He's separated. The divorce isn't final. But thanks for confirming the affair. Emily put her head in her hands. Mark, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Bullshit. You meant for every bit of it to happen. You just didn't mean to get caught. I walked over to her desk and leaned against it. Here's what's going to happen, Emily. You're going to tell me everything about your relationship with Jake Fallon, what he's promised you, what he's asked you for, what kind of business deals you've been helping him with. I can't do that. Sure you can. Because if you don't, I'm going to make those private investigator photos very public. Your yoga students, your business partners, your parents, everyone gets to see exactly what kind of person you really are. Emily looked up at me with tears in her eyes. You wouldn't do that. Try me. I'm apparently full of surprises. We stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Emily wiped her eyes and started talking. I met Jake 2 months ago at the coffee shop. He was charming, sophisticated, interested in what I had to say. We started meeting for coffee, then lunch, then hotel rooms. Yes, Mark, I felt alive again for the first time in years. Jake made me feel special, important. What did he want from you? At first, nothing, just my company. But then he started asking about the town, about local politics, about who made decisions regarding development permits. And you told him. I introduced him to people. Harbor Master Duffy, planning board members, town council representatives. Jake said he wanted to be a good neighbor, to understand the community before he built here. What else? Emily hesitated. He asked about our finances. How much the house was worth, what my business generated in revenue, your agency's client base. And you told him that too. I thought he was just trying to understand my life, my situation. Emily, you're not that naive. Jake Fallon is a con artist. He targets married women in small towns and uses them to facilitate his business deals. You're not special to him. You're a mark. That's not true. Jake loves me. He's asked me to move to Boston with him when his project here is finished. Really? What about his wife, Rebecca? Emily's face went white. What wife? The wife he's still married to. The wife he's been married to for 8 years. The wife he's currently divorcing but hasn't actually divorced yet. No. He told me he was single. He lied, just like he's been lying about everything else. I pulled out my phone and showed Emily the photos Danny had found of Jake and Rebecca at various social events over the past year. Emily stared at the screen, her face crumbling. Oh my God! Oh my God, what have I done? You've destroyed our marriage for a man who was using you. Congratulations. Emily started crying in earnest now, big gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Part of me felt sorry for her. She'd been manipulated by a professional. But the bigger part of me was coldly satisfied. She was finally seeing the consequences of her choices. Mark, I'm so sorry. Can we fix this? Can we try again? No. Please, I made a mistake. I was stupid and selfish, and I'm sorry. Emily, you didn't make a mistake. You made a series of deliberate choices over 2 months. You chose to lie to me, cheat on me, and help a con artist infiltrate our community. Those aren't mistakes. That's who you are. I stood up and headed for the door. The separation stands. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. Mark, wait! I turned back. What? What are you going to do about Jake? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. I'm going to give him exactly what he deserves, just like I'm giving you exactly what you deserve. I left Emily crying in her yoga studio and drove back to my hotel. Danny was waiting in the lobby with another envelope. More photos, he said. Jake and Emily at the bank this morning. Looks like they were trying to set up some kind of joint account. I looked at the photos. Emily and Jake at First National Bank of Millbrook, sitting across from loan officer Patricia Mills, paperwork spread across the desk. They're moving fast, I said. Yeah. My contact at the bank says Jake was asking about using Emily's business as collateral for a construction loan extension. Using her business as collateral for his debts? That's what it looks like. Emily would be on the hook if his project fails. I stared at the photos and felt that cold anger settle deeper in my chest. Jake Fallon wasn't just stealing my wife. He was setting her up to lose everything. Danny, I need you to do something else for me. What? I need you to find Jake's wife, Rebecca. I think it's time she knew what her husband's been up to in Millbrook. Danny grinned. Now, you're thinking like a chess player instead of a victim. Emily wanted to play games. Jake wanted to run a con. They're both about to learn that I'm much better at this than they thought. That night, I sat in my hotel room and planned my next moves. Emily and Jake thought they were so clever, so sophisticated, so much smarter than the small-town husband they were betraying. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Rebecca Fallon agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in Portland the next morning. Danny had tracked her down through social media and professional networks. She was a successful interior designer with her own firm in Boston. When I called and explained that her husband was having an affair in Millbrook, she didn't sound surprised. "I've been expecting this call," she said. "Jake has a pattern." Rebecca was elegant, well-dressed, and coldly furious. She looked like the kind of woman who could handle herself in any situation, and right now she was handling the situation of her cheating husband with surgical precision. "How long have you known?" I asked. "About this specific affair?" 2 weeks. "About Jake's general behavior?" 2 years. She sipped her latte and studied me across the table. "Your wife isn't his first, Mr. Grafton. She won't be his last." "Why haven't you confronted him?" "Because I'm waiting for the right moment. Jake thinks he's so clever, but he's actually quite predictable. He always gets greedy, always overreaches. I'm just waiting for him to hang himself." "What do you mean?" Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. "Jake's been borrowing money from our joint accounts to fund his Millbrook project, money that belongs to both of us, money he doesn't have the right to touch without my permission." I read the messages, Jake asking Rebecca to sign various financial documents, Rebecca stalling and asking questions, Jake getting increasingly frustrated and demanding. "He's desperate," Rebecca continued. "The Millbrook project is hemorrhaging money, his investors are getting nervous, and the bank is threatening to call in his loans. He needs a quick infusion of cash or he's going to lose everything. And he thinks Emily can provide that cash." "Exactly. He's probably convinced her to mortgage her business, maybe even your marital assets." I showed Rebecca the photos Danny had taken of Emily and Jake at the bank. She studied them with professional interest. "Yes, that's exactly what this looks like. Jake's setting your wife up to be his financial lifeline." "What happens when the project fails anyway?" "Emily loses everything. Her business, her savings, probably her house if she's foolish enough to use it as collateral. Jake declares bankruptcy and walks away to start over somewhere else." I felt sick. Emily had betrayed our marriage for a man who was planning to destroy her financially. "Rebecca, what if we worked together on this?" Her eyes sharpened. "What did you have in mind?" "You know Jake's business inside and out. I know Millbrook and the local players. Together we could expose what he's really doing here." "I'm listening." We spent the next hour planning. Rebecca had access to Jake's financial records through their joint accounts and shared business interests. She could document his pattern of using affairs to facilitate business deals, his history of leaving investors holding the bag, his current, desperate financial situation. I had Danny's surveillance photos, knowledge of local politics, and growing anger at being betrayed by my wife. "There's a town council meeting next Tuesday," I told Rebecca. "Jake's supposed to present an update on the Millbrook Landing project. What if we made sure the council members knew exactly who they were dealing with?" "I can prepare a comprehensive dossier on Jake's business practices, financial records, court documents from previous failed projects, testimonials from his other victims. And I can make sure the right people see it." Rebecca smiled, and it was a predator's smile. "Jake always said I was too soft, too trusting. He's about to find out how wrong he was." We exchanged contact information and agreed to meet again over the weekend to finalize our strategy. As I walked back to my car, I felt energized for the first time since this whole mess started. Emily and Jake thought they were so smart, so sophisticated, so much better than the people they were betraying. They were about to get a very painful education. That afternoon, I drove to the Driftwood for lunch. Word about my separation from Emily was all over town now, and I could feel the curious stares and whispered conversations as I walked in. Tara waved me over to my usual spot at the bar. "How you holding up, honey?" "Better every day. Learning a lot about people I thought I knew." Lenny Kowalski was in his corner booth, and he gestured for me to join him. I grabbed my beer and walked over. "Mark, I heard some interesting gossip today," Lenny said quietly. "Oh yeah? My nephew works construction on that new condo project. Says the developer's been asking a lot of questions about town finances, tax assessments, future development plans. Seems real interested in properties that might be going up for sale soon." "That's interesting." "Yeah. Also says the guy's been real friendly with some of the town wives, taking them out for coffee, asking about their husbands' businesses, their family finances." I leaned forward. "What wives?" "Well, your Emily for one, but also Janet Morrison, married to lawyer Jim Morrison, and Sarah Chen, the banker's wife." My blood ran cold. Jake wasn't just targeting Emily, he was working multiple angles, cultivating relationships with wives of key town officials. Jim Morrison was my lawyer. Sarah Chen's husband ran the loan department at First National Bank. "Lenny, this is important. What else did your nephew say?" "Said the developer's been promising these ladies that their husbands could get in on the ground floor of some big development deal. Make a lot of money if they played their cards right." "And if they didn't?" "Well, development projects can run into all kinds of problems. Permit delays, environmental issues, zoning challenges, things that could hurt local businesses that depend on tourism and construction." Jake wasn't just running a con, he was running an extortion scheme. Sleep with him and help his business, or watch your husband's livelihood suffer mysterious setbacks. I needed to call Rebecca immediately. "Lenny, I owe you a drink, a big one. Just glad to help, son. Never did like that Jake fellow, too slick, Guys like that are always trouble." I went outside and called Rebecca. She answered on the first ring. "Mark? What's wrong?" "Jake's not just targeting Emily. He's working multiple wives of town officials. I think he's running an extortion scheme." Jesus. That's his pattern in other towns, too. I just never had proof before. "Well, we're about to get proof. Can you meet me tomorrow? I think we need to accelerate our timeline." "Absolutely. Jake's getting more desperate by the day. If he's expanding his operation, that means he's running out of time." "Good. Let's make sure he runs out of everything else, too." That evening, I called Danny and asked him to expand his surveillance to include Janet Morrison and Sarah Chen. If Jake was manipulating multiple women, I wanted documentation of every contact, every meeting, every lie. "This is getting bigger than just your divorce case," Danny warned. "I know, but Jake Fallon picked the wrong town to run his con in. Millbrook takes care of its own." "What about Emily? She's still involved in this." I thought about that. Emily was a victim of Jake's manipulation, but she was also a willing participant in betraying our marriage. She'd made her choices, and now she'd have to live with the consequences. Emily made her bed. Now she gets to lie in it. "You sure about that? She's still your wife." "No, Danny. She stopped being my wife the moment she chose Jake Fallon over our marriage. Now she's just another one of his marks, and she's going to find out exactly what that means." I hung up and sat by the hotel window, looking out at Millbrook's harbor. Lights twinkled on the water, fishing boats rocked gently at their moorings, and the lighthouse beam swept across the dark ocean. This was my town. These were my people. Jake Fallon had made a serious mistake thinking he could come here and manipulate our community for his own profit. Emily had made an even bigger mistake thinking she could betray me without consequences. They were both about to learn exactly what those consequences looked like. The Millbrook Town Council met every second Tuesday at 7 p.m. in the basement of the library. It was usually a sleepy affair. Budget discussions, permit applications, complaints about potholes and snow removal. Maybe 20 people showed up on a busy night. Tonight was different. Word had somehow gotten around that Jake Fallon would be presenting an update on the Millbrook Landing project, and the basement was packed. I counted at least 60 people crammed into folding chairs, standing along the walls and clustering near the back exit. Rebecca and I had spent the weekend preparing our presentation. She'd compiled a devastating dossier on Jake's business practices, failed projects, angry investors, a pattern of financial manipulation that stretched back 5 years and 3 states. I'd coordinated with Danny to document Jake's current activities in Millbrook, including his affairs with local wives and his attempts to manipulate town officials. We'd also made some strategic phone calls. Janet Morrison's husband, Jim, was my lawyer, so he was already aware of Jake's affair with Emily. Sarah Chen's husband, David, ran the loan department at First National Bank, and he was very interested to learn that Jake had been cultivating a relationship with his wife while simultaneously applying for construction loans. Harbor Master Bill Duffy was furious to discover that his meetings with Jake at Emily's yoga studio had been part of a larger manipulation scheme. Jake walked into the council chamber at 5 minutes to 7, looking confident and polished in his expensive suit. He was carrying a leather portfolio and had the easy smile of a man who thought he had everything under control. Emily wasn't with him. I'd heard from Nina that Emily had closed her yoga studio for the week, claiming she needed time for spiritual reflection. More likely, she was hiding from the growing gossip about her affair. Jake took a seat in the front row and nodded to various council members. Mayor Patricia Wells smiled and waved back. Planning Board Chairman Robert Hayes shook Jake's hand. Everything looked normal and friendly. Jake had no idea what was coming. At exactly 7 p.m., Mayor Wells called the meeting to order. After the usual preliminaries, approval of last month's minutes, budget updates, a discussion about Christmas decorations for the town green, she called Jake to the podium. Our next agenda item is an update on the Millbrook Landing Development Project. Mr. Jake Fallon will present the current status and timeline. Jake stood up, straightened his tie, and walked to the podium with complete confidence. He opened his portfolio and began his presentation. Thank you, Mayor Wells, council members, and citizens of Millbrook. I'm pleased to report that Millbrook Landing is progressing well and will be a tremendous asset to your beautiful community. He clicked through a PowerPoint presentation showing architectural renderings of luxury condos, projected tax revenue increases, and estimated job creation numbers. It all looked very impressive and professional. Phase 1 construction is 60% complete, Jake continued. We expect to begin pre-sales within the next month, with move-ins starting next spring. This project represents a $12 million investment in Millbrook's future. Polite applause from the audience. Jake smiled and asked for questions. Planning Board Chairman Hayes raised his hand. Mr. Fallon, we've had some concerns about the project timeline. Originally, you projected completion by last month. What's causing the delays? Jake's smile tightened slightly. All construction projects face unforeseen challenges, Mr. Hayes. Weather delays, permit processing times, supply chain issues. We're confident we'll make up the lost time. What about the financing? This from David Chen, the banker. There have been rumors about cost overruns. All development projects require ongoing financial management, Mr. Chen. Millbrook Landing is well-funded and on solid financial footing. That was my cue. I stood up in the back of the room. Mr. Fallon, could you clarify what you mean by solid financial footing? Because the information I have suggests something quite different. Jake squinted into the crowd, trying to identify the voice. When he spotted me, his face went pale. I'm sorry, who are you? Mark Grafton, local business owner, taxpayer, and concerned citizen. Mayor Wells looked confused. Mr. Grafton, do you have a specific question about the development project? I do, Mayor Wells. I'd like to know if the council is aware of Mr. Fallon's business history and his current financial situation. Jake stepped closer to the microphone. I'm not sure what Mr. Grafton is implying, but my business record speaks for itself. You're right, it does. I pulled out the folder Rebecca had prepared. Should I start with the Kennebunkport project that left investors holding $2 million in bad debt? Or the Portsmouth development that was foreclosed on before completion? Or maybe the current lawsuit from your former business partner alleging fraud and misrepresentation? The room went dead quiet. Jake's face was now completely white. Those are private business matters that have no bearing on the Millbrook project. Really? Because it seems to me that a pattern of failed projects and angry investors is exactly the kind of thing our town council should know about before approving permits and tax incentives. Mayor Wells looked back and forth between Jake and me. Mr. Grafton, do you have documentation of these allegations? I do, and I'd like to present it to the council. Jake tried to regain control. Mayor Wells, this is clearly a personal attack. Mr. Grafton is going through a difficult divorce and my wife has been having an affair with Mr. Fallon for the past 2 months, I interrupted, which is another thing the council should probably know about. Gasps and murmurs from the audience. Jake looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Furthermore, I continued, Mr. Fallon has been cultivating inappropriate relationships with other wives of town officials, apparently as part of his business strategy. David Chen stood up abruptly. What the hell does that mean? It means your wife Sarah has been receiving a lot of attention from Mr. Fallon, coffee dates, lunch meetings, friendly conversations about your bank's lending practices. David's face turned red with anger. He spun to glare at Jake, who was now sweating visibly. Is that true? David demanded. Before Jake could answer, Rebecca Fallon stood up from her seat in the middle of the room. She was impeccably dressed and radiating cold fury. It's absolutely true, she said in a clear, carrying voice. And I should know. I'm Jake's wife. The room exploded. Everyone started talking at once, voices raised in shock and outrage. Mayor Wells banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. Jake stared at Rebecca in horror. Rebecca? What are you doing here? Cleaning up your mess, as usual. Rebecca walked to the front of the room, her heels clicking authoritatively on the linoleum floor. Mayor Wells, council members, I apologize for the disruption, but I felt you should know exactly who you're dealing with. She handed Mayor Wells a thick folder. This contains documentation of my husband's business practices over the past 5 years. Failed projects, lawsuits, bankruptcy filings, and a consistent pattern of using extramarital affairs to manipulate local officials and investors. Jake tried to interrupt. Rebecca, this is not the place. Shut up, Jake. Rebecca's voice cut through the room like a blade. You forfeited the right to object when you decided to seduce half the wives in Millbrook as part of your business plan. She turned back to the council. Jake is facing bankruptcy. The Millbrook Landing project is massively over budget and behind schedule. He's been trying to use local women to pressure their husbands into providing financial assistance, favorable loan terms, and expedited permits. Harbor Master Bill Duffy stood up, his face dark with anger. Is that why you wanted those meetings at the yoga studio? You were using Emily Grafton to get to me? Jake's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He had no answer that wouldn't make things worse. Mayor Wells banged her gavel again. Mr. Fallon, in light of these serious allegations, I think we need to postpone this presentation pending a full investigation. Mayor Wells, I can explain. No, she said firmly. I think you've explained quite enough. This meeting is adjourned. The room erupted again as people surged toward the exits, everyone talking at once about the bombshell revelations. Jake stood alone at the podium, abandoned and exposed. Rebecca walked over to him. Pack your things and get out of town, Jake. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. Rebecca, please. No. We're done. You're done. Find another town to destroy, because you're finished in Millbrook. Jake looked around the room desperately, but found no friendly faces. David Chen was glaring at him with murderous intent. Bill Duffy looked ready to throw him into the harbor, Even Mayor Wells was shaking her head in disgust. Jake gathered his papers and fled. I found Rebecca outside the library, standing by her car and looking satisfied. "That went well," I said. "Better than I expected. Jake always was his own worst enemy." "What happens now?" "Now Jake faces the consequences of his choices. His investors will abandon him, the bank will call in his loans, and Millbrook Landing will probably end up in foreclosure." "And Emily?" Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "Your wife was manipulated by a professional con artist, Mark. That doesn't excuse her choices, but it does explain them. I'm not sure I can forgive her. That's your decision to make. But remember, Jake targeted her specifically because he thought she was vulnerable and unhappy. Maybe ask yourself why she was vulnerable in the first place." Rebecca got into her car and drove away, leaving me standing in the library parking lot with a lot to think about. My phone buzzed. Text from Emily. "Mark, I heard what happened at the town council meeting. Can we please talk? I know I don't deserve it, but please give me a chance to explain." I stared at that message for a long time. Emily had betrayed our marriage, lied to my face, and helped a con artist manipulate our community. She'd called me her biggest disappointment and then proved that she was mine. But Rebecca was right about one thing. Jake had targeted Emily because she was unhappy. And maybe I needed to ask myself why my wife had been so unhappy that she'd fallen for the first smooth-talking stranger who paid attention to her. I turned off my phone and drove back to my hotel. I had a lot of thinking to do. 3 days after the town council meeting, Jake Fallon was gone. His silver BMW disappeared from the Millbrook Landing construction site, his hotel room was cleaned out, and his phone went straight to voicemail. According to Danny's sources, Jake had loaded his car and driven south in the middle of the night, leaving behind a half-finished development project and a trail of angry creditors. The fallout was swift and brutal. First National Bank moved to foreclose on the Millbrook Landing property within 48 hours. Jake's investors, a group of Boston-area businessmen who'd been promised quick returns on luxury condos, were left holding worthless contracts and empty promises. The town was buzzing with gossip and recriminations. How had they been fooled by such an obvious con man? Why hadn't anyone done proper background checks? Who else had been taken in by Jake's manipulation? Emily's name was at the center of every conversation. I was having lunch at the Driftwood when Sienna Walsh approached my table. Emily's business partner and best friend looked haggard, like she hadn't slept in days. "Mark, can I talk to you?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Sure." Sienna sat down and immediately started crying. "This is all my fault. I should have seen what Jake was doing to Emily. I should have stopped it." "How could you have stopped it?" "I knew she was unhappy. She kept talking about feeling trapped, feeling like she was wasting her life in a small town with a boring husband. I should have told her she was being ridiculous instead of encouraging her to follow her heart." Tara brought Sienna a cup of coffee and a box of tissues. The lunch crowd was pretending not to listen, but I could feel everyone's attention focused on our conversation. "Emily made her own choices, Sienna." "But I helped. I covered for her when she met Jake. I lied to you about where she was, what she was doing. I thought I was being a good friend, but I was just enabling her to destroy her marriage." Sienna wiped her eyes and looked at me directly. "Mark, Emily's a mess. She's barely eating, barely sleeping. The yoga studio's been closed all week because she can't function. What does she want from me?" "She wants to talk to you. She wants to apologize and try to fix things." "Some things can't be fixed, Sienna." "I know, but maybe you could at least listen to her? Not for her sake, but for yours, so you can have closure." I thought about that. Rebecca Fallon's words kept echoing in my mind. Maybe ask yourself why she was vulnerable in the first place. Where is she? At home. Our home, I mean. Your home. She's been staying there since Jake disappeared. That surprised me. I'd assumed Emily would be hiding out with friends or family. She's been sleeping in the guest room, Sienna continued. She says the master bedroom reminds her too much of what she threw away. After Sienna left, I sat at the driftwood for another hour, nursing my beer and thinking. Tara wiped down the bar around me, occasionally offering unsolicited advice. You know what your problem is, Mark? You're too nice, always have been. So everyone keeps telling me. Emily took advantage of that. But maybe she's learned her lesson now. Maybe. Or maybe she's just sorry she got caught. Only one way to find out. That evening, I drove to the house on Maple Street for the first time since I'd walked out 2 weeks ago. The lawn needed mowing, the flower beds looked neglected, and Emily's car was parked in the driveway with a thick layer of dust on the windshield. I sat in my Honda for a few minutes, looking at the house we'd bought together 8 years ago. It looked smaller than I remembered, more ordinary. Not the castle I'd thought we were building, just a regular house where two people had tried and failed to be happy together. I used my key to let myself in. The house was dark except for a light in the kitchen. I found Emily sitting at the breakfast table, staring into a cup of tea that had probably gone cold hours ago. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her yoga clothes were wrinkled, and she'd lost weight. When she looked up at me, her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Mark, thank you for coming. I sat down across from her at the table where we'd eaten thousands of meals together, discussed our days, made plans for the future that would never happen now. Sienna said you wanted to talk. Emily nodded and tried to compose herself. I don't know where to start. Start with the truth, all of it. So she did. Emily told me about meeting Jake at the coffee shop, about how charming and sophisticated he'd seemed, about how he'd made her feel special and important. She told me about their first lunch, their first kiss, their first time together at the hotel in Rockport. She told me about Jake's gradual requests for information about the town, about local officials, about our finances, how he'd convinced her that she was helping him become a better member of the community. She told me about the bank meetings, about Jake's suggestion that she could invest in his development project, about his promises that they'd move to Boston together when Millbrook Landing was complete. I was so stupid, Emily said, tears streaming down her face. I thought he loved me. I thought I was finally getting the life I deserved. What life did you think you deserved, Emily? She looked at me with surprise. What do you mean? You said you thought you were getting the life you deserved. What was wrong with the life you had? Emily was quiet for a long time. I felt invisible, like I was disappearing into this small town, into this ordinary marriage, into this ordinary life. Jake made me feel like I mattered again. You mattered to me. I know. But Mark, you were so content with everything, the house, the town, your business, our routine. You never wanted anything more. I wanted you to be happy. But you never asked me what would make me happy. You just assumed I wanted the same things you wanted. That stung because it was true. I had assumed Emily was content with our life because I was content with it. I'd never asked if she had bigger dreams, different goals, other plans for her future. So, you decided to have an affair instead of talking to me about it. I didn't decide anything. It just happened. Jake was exciting and worldly, and he made me feel alive again. And I made you feel dead. Emily flinched. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. That's exactly what you meant. I was boring, ordinary Mark who was holding you back from your exciting, sophisticated life with Jake Fallon. Mark, please. The problem is, Emily, Jake Fallon was a con artist who was using you. Everything he told you was a lie. He's married, he's broke, and he was planning to steal our money and disappear. I know that now. Do you? Do you really understand what happened here? Emily looked at me with confusion. What do you mean? Jake didn't choose you because you were special, Emily. He chose you because you were dissatisfied and vulnerable. He chose you because he thought you'd be easy to manipulate. Emily's face crumpled. That's cruel. It's true. Jake targeted you the same way he targeted Janet Morrison and Sarah Chen and probably half a dozen other women in other towns. You weren't his great love. You were his mark. Stop it. And you know what the really sad part is? You were right about one thing. You do deserve better than the life you had. You deserve better than a husband who took you for granted and never asked what you really wanted. Emily looked up at me with surprise. But you also deserve better than a con artist who was planning to steal your money and abandon you. You deserve better than friends who encouraged you to cheat instead of encouraging you to fix your marriage. You deserve better than the choices you made. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Emily spoke. What happens now? Now we get divorced. We divide our assets. We sell the house. We move on with our lives. Is there any chance? Could we try counseling again? Could we try to rebuild? I looked at Emily, really looked at her, and tried to imagine us sitting in Dr. Young's office again, trying to work through the wreckage of our marriage, trying to rebuild trust after betrayal, trying to rediscover love after disappointment. Emily, 2 weeks ago you told me I was the biggest disappointment you'd ever had. You said it in front of a therapist. After months of lying to my face about your affair, you helped a con artist target our community and our friends. You were willing to mortgage our future for a man who was planning to abandon you. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough. Sorry doesn't undo the choices you made. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust, or restore love, or fix what's broken between us. Emily started crying again. So that's it? 15 years of marriage and you're just throwing it away? I'm not throwing anything away, Emily. You already threw it away. I'm just acknowledging reality. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where we'd hosted barbecues and birthday parties, where we'd talked about planting a garden and maybe building a deck someday. You know what's funny? You called me your biggest disappointment, but you're wrong. My biggest disappointment isn't that our marriage failed. My biggest disappointment is that I never really knew who you were. I turned back to Emily. The woman I married wouldn't have had an affair. The woman I married wouldn't have lied to my face for 2 months. The woman I married wouldn't have helped a stranger manipulate our community. So either you changed into someone I don't recognize, or you were always someone I never really knew. Mark, people make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Emily. This was a choice, a series of choices made over months that showed me exactly who you really are. I walked toward the front door. I'll have Jim Morrison contact you about the divorce proceedings. We'll try to keep it simple and fair. Mark, wait. I turned back. What you said about me deserving better? Did you mean that? I looked at Emily one last time, sitting at our kitchen table in our house, surrounded by the life she'd found so disappointing that she'd been willing to destroy it for a con artist's promises. Yeah, I meant it. You deserve better than what you settled for, and so do I. I walked out of the house and didn't look back. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Emily sold her yoga studio and moved to Portland, where she got a job teaching at a wellness center. We split our assets 50-50, sold the house, and went our separate ways. Jake Fallon never came back to Millbrook. According to Rebecca, who kept in touch occasionally, he'd moved to Florida and was reportedly running the same con on wealthy retirees in Tampa. His wife divorced him and took half of what little he had left. The Millbrook Landing project was eventually completed by a different developer who bought the property out of foreclosure. The condos sold well, and the town got the tax revenue Jake had promised. Life went on. I bought a small house near the harbor and threw myself into my work. Grafton and Associates landed the tourism board contract and several other big accounts. Business was better than ever. Sometimes I ran into Sienna or Harper around town. They were always polite, always asked how I was doing, always seemed vaguely guilty about their role in Emily's affair. I didn't hold grudges. Everyone had made their choices and lived with the consequences. One evening, about a year after the divorce, I was having dinner at the Driftwood when Rebecca Fallon walked in. She looked good, confident, successful, like a woman who'd moved on with her life. "Mark, I didn't know you were still in Millbrook. It's my town. Emily was the one who wanted to leave." Rebecca sat down at my table and ordered a glass of wine. "How are you doing?" "Good. Really good, actually. You?" "Excellent. The divorce gave me half of Jake's remaining assets, which wasn't much, but it was enough to expand my design business. I'm doing better than ever." We talked for an hour about business, about Millbrook, about the strange circumstances that had brought us together. As she was getting ready to leave, Rebecca asked the question I'd been expecting. "Do you ever regret it? Exposing Jake, ending your marriage, blowing up your life?" I thought about that. No. Emily was right about one thing. I was settling for a life that wasn't making me happy. I was just too comfortable to admit it. And now? I looked around the Driftwood, at the familiar faces of my neighbors and friends, at the harbor lights twinkling through the windows, at the life I'd built for myself in this small town that Emily had found so disappointing. Now I'm exactly where I belong, with exactly the life I want. Turns out the biggest disappointment was thinking I needed something different. Rebecca smiled and raised her wine glass. "To getting exactly what we deserve." I raised my beer. "To getting exactly what we deserve." We clinked glasses, and I realized that for the first time in years, I was completely, genuinely happy. Emily had called me her biggest disappointment. She was wrong. I wasn't her disappointment. I was her biggest mistake, and losing me was the price she paid for not appreciating what she had until it was gone. But that was her problem now, not mine.